Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Welcome to the Messengers in Our Home. Hello, dear Kardec Radio listeners, and welcome back to the Messengers in Our Home. Tonight we're going to talk about the last part of the book, the third part, the summary that Mackenzie and I have been doing for the past 2 weeks. Hello, Mackenzie. Great to have you again here with us.
Hi, Francisca. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Messengers in Our Home.
Yeah, so we still have the companionship, we still have the messengers with us, and we know that they will continue with us even though the book will finish, or has finished already, and our discussion about the book will finish soon as well. But it's a good reminder for us that the good spirits are always there to help us, and that it's important for us to elevate our thoughts, to pray, to protect our home, which are some of the topics that we're going to discuss right now. And just for a quick reminder, we finished with chapter 33, En route to Earth, last week, which was the transition, the journey between the 8th station to Rio de Janeiro, so to the Earth itself, where Andre and Vicente will have their first opportunity to collaborate with us, or incarnate and discarnate as well. So chapter 34 is entitled A Workshop
of No Solar.
Exactly, Mackenzie.
Yeah, so a workshop of No Solar, that like Francisca just said, right? They're traveling from one place to another on the spiritual realm, and then Aniceto say, okay, look, now we're going to show you that No Solar has some places that are here on the incarnate realm as well, and we're going to meet one of them. And by that, we have to remember that No Solar is just one spiritual city, right? So lots of other spiritual cities on the spiritual realm have retreats in our world here, in the physical realm. So when they meet this place, we have to remember that maybe, the church that you go to, the spirit center that you go to, or even your house, right? Our houses may be small retreats where we can find good people working for others, good people really striving to create a very good family. So it is very, very interesting for us to remember this, that we have those places, and that we can make our places, our homes, the centers, the churches, our temples as these small retreats from those spiritual cities that we belong to, or where we came from before we were incarnated here. Do you want to point out something special about this chapter, Francisca?
Yeah, I mean, what I found really interesting is something that he says in the beginning, that he noticed the presence of many low-order discarnates following closely behind various pedestrians or attached to them in a strange embrace. Because he had this vision enhancement, he now sees clearer, like we were discussing last week. And he notices that the presence of the spirit is nearly everywhere. And I think it's interesting not to install fear in ourselves, but just to become a bit more aware that it's really not something that happens far away from us, or sometimes maybe if we are in a bad mood, but that the influence of the spirits is there many times, and that we choose what kind of company we keep. And that it's normal, that it's nothing strange, nothing supernatural or something like that. It's just part of life, because the spiritual world and the material world, they belong together. They're connected. And this connection, this interchange, that is what we are talking about.
True, and it is also we're going to see more of the same idea that Francisca just mentioned later on in the book, where we choose the ones who we want to be close to, be it physically, materially, and naturally, spiritually speaking. So we are the ones who are responsible for our friends or the people who we attach ourselves to. And it is also in this chapter, and so that we can move on to chapter 35, that we meet, of course, the owners of that house, and we meet this couple, which is very interesting because they are a couple, but one is already discarnated, which is Isidoro, and the other one is Dona Isabel, who is still incarnated, and she's taking care of her daughters and of her son, of their daughters and their son, and they are this couple. They're still connected to each other, although she is a widow, but she is able to talk to Isidoro from time to time on her sleep or through her mediumship and so on. And then we move to our home worship, right, Francisca?
Yeah, that's true. I just want to mention one more thing, because Andre is astonished that there is this protection in this house that is quite different from what he has experienced in his home, for example, because there he could enter whenever he chose to, but this, because it is a workshop of Nosolar, this is a special house that has special spiritual protection, special in the sense because they just they've worked for it and they're maintaining it. It's not that we can't have it ourselves in our houses as well. Actually, that's one of our aims, to have a spiritually protected house as well. They're gathered together as the family, and it's interesting that they say as well that there are 5 children and that the girls are all friends from Nosolar. So it's the question again, how is our family created? But the boy is of a lower order, spiritually speaking, and he is going to make a little bit of trouble, as we're going to see right now. So the home worship, they gather together around the table, and one of the little ones says the opening prayer, asking God for light, for help them to understand the gospel study, and to give them the spiritual nourishment, the bread for the soul, and the water of eternal life, so that they can have the strength to go through their difficulties during the daily life. And there are some, like we did as well when we were having our home worship studies here on Kardec Radio. So they had some uplifting message, and the title of the day was "The Kingdom of Heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in his field." So chapter 13 of Saint Matthew. And because Dona Isabel was very focused on her spiritual work, she had the support of the good spirits, which we of course can have as well. So there was a spirit who was inspiring her to talk about the subject. They did actually 2 things. They had this one quote of the Bible, and then they took some current news article which was talking about a young girl that had committed suicide, supposedly because she was so much in love. And then Dona Isabel explains, well, we can never kill out of love, because it just doesn't make any sense. And that the mustard seed is available to all of us. It depends, we need to sow all the time, but the fruits that we will reap afterwards is what matters, right, Mackenzie?
Yes, that is true. And just like you said, it's a mustard seed, right? It's just a representation of something that can grow, and what types of seeds are we planting, right? It's our choice of what plant we want to grow. We want it to be in our garden. So I prefer this, I prefer that. The only thing is, that's fine. We have the freedom of choice. But later on, when the plant is all fully grown, I'll have to get the fruit from that tree. I'm not going to be able to harvest something different. So if I choose the easiest way out, then I'll have to deal with the consequences. And it's not for us to judge the others, but it's for us to think about what others do, so that we do the same, follow their paths, or we don't follow their paths, right? So if we love truly, we will not commit crimes. We will create more ways of loving each other and not of destroying each other. One thing that I like about this chapter that Andre talks so much about prayers, right? In all the books, we hear some people praying, we hear some good prayers. And in this chapter, there's a very, very simple prayer from a very, very innocent little girl. It's called Nelly. And she just, like in 4 or 5 lines, she gives this great prayer which comes from the heart. So it is as if to remind us that a prayer doesn't need to have 1,000 words, 14 minutes. It can be like 10 seconds full of love and full of heart, and it will be much better than waiting for a prayer to end, and we have to keep opening our eyes up because we can't stand like doing a prayer of 5 minutes, 6 minutes. So let's keep it simple, keep it short, straight from the heart, really focusing on what is really important, which is the connection between us and our Creator.
Yeah, that's true. And it's also these short prayers that help us to stay connected throughout the day, so that we don't have only one specific time, maybe in the morning or at night, that we pray and keep this connection to God, but that it's in the little moments that may be stressful in the traffic situation or at work or something, that we learn to, like you said, in a simple way, from the heart, connect to God and take that nourishment, take that strength that we get out of that, because the prayer is for us. It's not for God. You know, He doesn't need our prayers. It's us that we need the support that comes by it, with it. And in chapter 36, Mother and Children, they, after Isabel's explanation, so to speak, the children have the chance to talk a little bit about, well, what their concerns are. And the smallest one, Marietta, asks very innocently, Mama, if Jesus is so good, then why do we eat only once a day here in our home? So as we had noticed before, it's a very humble residence, and the focus really is on the spiritual here. And this is what, with the resources that Donna Isabel has, is what she tries to teach their children as well. And because, of course, she's sad and replies, you know, we shouldn't be too concerned about the material needs. What really matters is the spiritual needs, that they are met, and they, of course, are met in that house. Because she said, you know what, despite us not having that much to eat, we are healthy. We don't have any sickness, we don't have any problems that others cause by abusing food. So there's always two sides to the coin. It's not that, you know, not having enough food is always the worst. And of course they are able to sustain themselves. I'm not saying, you know, people who are starving, etc. So, and then also she says that, or she reminds them that, you know, that their father Isidoro, although he left, that they never lack what they need, and that they get the help from the good friends and from Isidoro. And Noemi, which is the youngest one, so Marietta is the second to youngest one, says, yeah, it's right, I saw Daddy, which shows us again that mediumship in children is quite normal. And Donna Isabel as well has mediumship faculties, and it has been explained to us that she's not allowed to see everything that's going on in her home in order not to jeopardize her earthly experience, but she sees about a 20th part of it, and she said, oh yeah, I know you're right, because I saw Daddy too. And that's just wonderful, because reincarnation or experience that children have, it's really important that we take it seriously, even if you maybe not see the people that, or the spirits that the children see, right?
Yeah, it is. It is very beautiful. And when we have children around, that sometimes out of the blue they come with questions, or they come with some really interesting ideas. We should really pay attention. And sometimes really encourage those feelings, right? Those sensations that can really be extend our gratefulness for things that happen to us, and this hope that we all must have to really go through life, enjoying life, and by enjoying I mean not only playing, but living well, living better, not only for our body, but for our soul as well. Which brings me to think about the other side of the equation, which is also shown here with Dona Isabel's son, right? That he is the 12-year-old boy that is not in the same level, spiritually speaking, here with the other ones, right? With the other girls and with his mother. He is just not grateful. He has that rebellious spirit. And one of the things that I really like about his talk with his mother is that there's a point where she talks about poverty, and she says that it's one of the best opportunities available for spiritual growth. And of course, she's not talking to those who don't work, who don't look for work or to serve to get to and understand what poverty is, but those who really want to keep the faith. And then he says, that's the part that I really like it. He says that I can't agree with you. Even children from kindergarten can't agree with you. They believe it otherwise. And then his mother looks at him and says, "We're not in kindergarten here, my son. This is serious. This is something that we need to really put some thought into it. We will receive news involving lies every time, and depending how spiritually evolved we are, we will believe those lies and will live those lies. So we really have to be aware of what's outside and really think through these things. That's how it is. Sometimes we are involved in some things that we have to be very aware, and like we were just talking about prayer, we have to be watchful as well. So it's the watch and pray that Jesus teaches us. Sometimes we cannot see, and then we can come back to the gospel always, just like Aniceto says at the end of the chapter. The gospel brings balance to the soul, and that's where we need to get that light to really understand tough times sometimes that we are going through.
Yeah, that's true. And another point which I find is worth reflecting about is it's to connect the material and the spiritual work rather than putting it on opposites and saying, oh, like Joãozinho is of the position that, oh no, the material is more important than the spiritual, so we should rent the room that they're using for the gospel studies, and then we have more to eat. But this is obviously a very short-sighted and a very materialistic point of view, whereas Dona Isabel says, no, the spiritual is much more important than the material, and even though it means that we have less money, this room is sacred to me, and it's our commitment that we made in the spiritual world to offer this resting place for the Spirit to come here on earth, and also to help the people that come to the meetings that they are holding in public. And I think this is one of the challenges, at least I have as well, to find the balance of the material and the spiritual, and to remind myself that even though the spiritual might not, or it might not seem that we have a return immediately, that it's a very, very important investment in our lives. And with that, we move over to chapter 37 in the home sanctuary. And now we see the spiritual side of it, Mackenzie, right?
Yeah, that's true. It is very interesting because it goes to show exactly what you were talking about, right? We were having this conversation. The incarnates are having this conversation, but there is also the spiritual side, which that we saw previously when, for example, during the gospel at home, she was teaching something or she was making a comment about the topics that they chose, and then the spirit, Fabio, was inspiring her to talk. So it's always this thing between both worlds, right? So we have to always remember this, that we are always in contact with them, and they are always in contact with us, so that we can find that balance. And in the home sanctuary, we see that they eat, right? It is interesting that when they get there, Andres says that 2 co-workers from No Solar served us a simple, light meal, which I cannot describe here for lack of analogous terms. So these spirits that are connected to and working together with us, and even in No Solar, we talked about this a while ago, but here, when they come, they need to have some sort of physical, quote unquote here, like physical, spiritual nourishment, not only the moral one, but because of our physical body or perispirit, we still need those some type of food. And it's not, as we say, only food for thought, but also naturally food for the body. But then they will meet a few people there, right, Francisca?
Yeah, so they show us what's going on the spiritual side of Donna Isabel's home. As it is a workshop of No Solar, it's a meeting point where different spirits come together, or to rest, like Andre and Vicente are doing in the first moment, or to work. And it's a very busy place, and I think sometimes it's hard to imagine that, but I think it's great. It's really great to know that this is happening. So they will bring some of the incarnates during sleep state as well, and then they will meet the spirits that are discarnate already. And they talk about as well that the storms and the natural occurrences of weather, that they are still frightening for some low-order spirits.
And about that, what is interesting is that once they are afraid, they will look for what happens when we are afraid. We look for shelter, right?
Yeah.
So what happens is if it's a lower order spirit, it will not be able to find a place that's protected, to find protection in a place that is a good place. Otherwise, they will disturb that place. So they will always go to those places where completely open to any kinds of spirits that can do whatever they want. And if we don't try to make our house a protected house, it will happen that maybe some of these spirits will be able to go into our house, and depending on the level of our thoughts, the level of our minds, they will probably stay there. They will probably disturb ourselves. So that's why it is very interesting. A comment that I don't know who says it, but in this chapter there's this line that I really love that says, "The home that cultivates prayer becomes a fortress." So no bad spirit, no evil spirit, no a spirit of a low order will be able to enter a fortress or a home, a house that cultivates prayer, meaning that has love inside of it. And those spirits will only be able to get into our house if we allow them to come to be helped, not just as a passersby, not just as a person who will come and then stay and then take care and take hold of our place.
Yeah, that's right. And it just reinforces once more how important the home worship meeting is, so that we gather together once a week, pray together, not only to illuminate ourselves, to work on our inner transformation, but also to create these spiritual defenses for our home. And in chapter 38, Hard at Work, we have one example, for example, that there is an old woman, which is the grandmother, and there's a granddaughter that meet while the granddaughter is asleep. So the grandmom is in the spiritual world already, she's discarnate, and the young woman is needing some help. And it's good advice for all of us, because it starts saying, My grandchild, don't give so much importance to your problems. Don't hate on anyone. Guard your spiritual peace. Slander, my child, and here we come to the images that we sometimes remember in the dreams, is a serpent that threatens the heart. But if you face it head on, strongly and peacefully, we will soon see that the serpent has no life of its own. It's a toy viper that breaks like glass in our hands. And then, once the toy is conquered, we'll have a flower of virtue. Don't be afraid. Don't miss this opportunity to testify to your understanding of Jesus. And these images, it's like, well, but why is she talking like that? Because, of course, her granddaughter won't be able to remember everything that she heard, but she will wake up with the sensation of comfort that she has met her grandma, like maybe saying, oh, I remember grandma, I dreamt of her, and she will deep down understand the message with the images. The serpent that was there that breaks in her hands and then becomes a flower, right?
Yeah, these images are so powerful. And like you were saying, as you were saying, we remember these things from our dreams, but even for ourselves here, we're awake right now, right? This image of a serpent that turns into a flower, right? It is a very powerful image that stays with us. And if we understand the metaphor, right, as he says, or I think it's Aniceto who makes the comment later on that says, well, this serpent is, we can compare it to slander that wounds when it wounds a peaceful conscience. So, but it's a serpent, but it will transform itself when we face it with Christian courage, because it really won't hurt me. It may hurt my body, but won't hurt myself, because I am much more than just this body that I have or that I am living in at this specific moment. So it is a very powerful explanation, and which reminds me, I think it's in this chapter as well that they talk about Freud, because he was one who used to interpret dreams as well. And as someone says here in the chapter, says, well, Freud was a great man and he came with a great mission, and he had taught us a lot of things, but of course he didn't teach us everything. So we have to understand that science is what it is. It has its own limitations. We need science. We have to use science, but we have to understand that science is still bound, most of it at least, to the material side of the world. And with Spiritism, we can understand that it is important, but that we also need to put a different level of understanding on top of what science already teach us, right? But then work never stops, right, Francisca?
Yeah, it's true. And so they are very busy the whole night, and Andre and Vicente are actually listening in to conversations. They're observing what kind of spirits are coming and going, while Aniceto is taking care of the matters that he came to resolve during that time. And with the hours passing, Andre realizes how important that humble little house really was for the spiritual world, because he said there were so many spirit workers who had stayed overnight and had things to resolve. And another example, which is really heartwarming, is a woman who's really grateful for Isabel for giving that space to the spirits to rest, because she was able to find her daughter and stop her from committing suicide. So she tells the story of the daughter that she was widowed early on, and then the mom left as well, and she couldn't bear the suffering. And she said something interesting once again. I approached her during the day, but my efforts were useless. With her mind absorbed in busyness and material complications, she couldn't feel my influence. And she said, well, I needed to meet at night, but it wasn't easy because she's not evolved enough, the woman, to operate alone. And in coming to this service place, the workshop of No Solar, she was able to act together with other groups of spirits that helped her and supported her, united in working for the good. And in this way, she was able to find her daughter, to meet with her during the dream, and making herself heard and a good suggestion. And now she's at peace because her daughter thankfully refrained from committing suicide. And this is really, it's actually two things that come to my mind. One, how important it is that even during the day, like I mentioned before, we, at least every once in a while, we reconnect to the spiritual and don't get too much underwater with all the material complications and tasks we have, because we can quickly lose the focus and get so tied up into the material struggle that we forget that there's much more to life and that there's much more help for us available, even with the material matters as well sometimes. And the second thing is how important the intelligent sleep is, that we ask to be guided, that we are taken to a place where we can meet our loved ones, where we can attend to constructive meetings, learning excursions, or whatever it may be. Do you want to say anything else, Mackenzie, or are we moving to the countryside already?
No, I just want to point out that there's the other story, right, which is also very important for all of us. That is the story that two spirits decided to bring a group of spirits or a spirit to the mediumistic meeting there. And then instead of helping them, these spirits, last time they disturbed more than they were able to be helped, because they really didn't want to receive any help, which is always important to us. We cannot, just because we're sympathetic to a person, to force that person to come or to allow that person to start working at a place where he is not ready to work yet. So we always have to be very careful to who we are inviting to certain types of meetings, if the person is not ready yet for that type of meeting, right? It is important for us to really understand that we have to have an open heart and an open mind to go to certain types of meetings. But if we are open-minded, even if we don't believe, that is really fine. But if we are intentionally deaf and blind, then it will be most harmful, not only for them probably, but also for the meeting itself. And there's the spirit guide there admonishes these two spirits because they invited some other spirits who should not be there, should not have been there at that specific meeting. But then we head to the countryside.
Yeah, that's true, because at the end of the day, we all have our time power of evolution, right? So, and it's not advisable sometimes to try to speed up a progress that we or whoever is involved is not quite able to do at that moment. But after this really busy night, they head to the countryside to repose and to rest. And still they make a very interesting observation. They are volitating through the city because they don't have anything immediate to do. And Andre asks, what are those dark stains on the public street? And Aniceto explains, well, these are clouds of various kinds of bacteria. They float around in compact groups in obedience to the principle of affinity. Look at those arabesques of shadow. So these are zones of inferior mental matter that is continually emitted by a certain class of people. It's actually quite shocking to notice that how much responsibility we have on what we emit into the atmosphere as well through our thoughts. And again, it's the reminder that the watch and pray of the gospel is important in every situation, and that only people with positive mentality can overcome the multiple influences of the lower nature. So by going more into deeper, it's always like, well, of course, a cloud of bacteria is produced by a sick body, and a cloud of mental larvae is produced by a sick mind. It's the same circumstances. It's the law of affinity. But what the real healing concerns is always from the spirit. So it's not about being shocked about, oh, this or this happens. It's the law of life. It's what we attract. It's what we create. And whatever we think and whatever we say, whatever we do, anything that comes out of us, spirits, first has a vibratory effect on ourselves.
Yeah, and like Aniceto says, right, that we all need to know how, not only how to emit those vibrations, but also how to receive those vibrations, because, and that's why they are going to the countryside, right, heading there to the countryside to, as you said in the beginning, and I love that word, repose or rest, so that we can receive some of those good vibrations, so that we get that comfort. I was thinking about one or two chapters ago when we said that they were eating something that was different, and maybe for Aniceto, which at this point here is the highest level of spirit that we know, he will probably eat even less than the other ones. And by going to the countryside, he will be able to get and to know how to receive even more those good vibrations from Earth. And that Andre says, Aniceto tells Andre at one point that they have the sun's light, right, the light of the sun, coupled with the Earth's magnetism that allows to destroy or to minimize the harm that what we emit to the atmosphere, to the spiritual atmosphere of the Earth. And if we go back even further back to other chapters, when they are coming to Earth, right, Aniceto describes, right, how when they're arriving, how dark it is close to Earth compared to when we are moving far and far away from Earth, depending on how the atmosphere is due to what we think all the time.
Yeah, and it's a constant learning process for us, because it's eye-opening when we read or hear something like that, but then to put it into practice every single moment is quite a different story.
It is indeed.
But that shouldn't encourage us. On the contrary, it should give us the strength to just keep on going and to say, even if you fell down just a little while ago, okay, that's all right. Just get aware, get up again, and let's keep on moving forward. So, Amongst the Trees, chapter 41, reminds us of the power of the vigorous reservoir of vital principles, lovely words, that nature has to offer us. And we feel it too if you go into a lovely forest or to a lake. If you're really immersed in nature, just by being there, we feel refreshed, because the air is clearer, there's more oxygen through the plants, and it helps us to regain our strength if we are often, which most of us probably are, in a city environment where we exactly face not only our own emissions, but the emissions of all the people around us as well. So they go there to rest a little bit of the night's work.
Yeah, and let's face it, Francisca. If we physically, right, if we materially can improve our health, and there are so many studies about it, right? So let's say people who have certain difficulties, if they enter in touch with animals, like with horses. There are therapies that allow people to get better social relations with, if they start touching and living for a few hours with some types of animals, so horses, for example. And if we go to, like just you said, like to a lake, or if I prefer to go to the beach to be in front of the sea, or if I prefer, like, I don't know, go into a forest or go into this, whatever, the river, the waterfalls, we feel refreshed. Can you imagine, spiritually speaking, what we can get from these places? And that's basically what they're trying to remind us here, right? We have, and like you said, it's even highlighted here as well in my copy of the book, right? The countryside is a most abundant and vigorous reservoir of vital principles. So if we're talking about physically about ourselves, imagine the spiritual side of it, right? Although they don't get tired like we do physically, but we have to, even when we discard it, we have to rest as well. And what a better place to rest than a calm, than a place that brings us, in contact with what we truly are, right? A creature of God.
Yeah, sure. And as you mentioned, the animals, and everything is important. The plant kingdom is important. The animals are important. And we have this case of the man that was mistreating his mule. And then the mule kicked him, he fell and had an accident and got injured. So now he will have to suffer a while to recover his organic balance. But as they say, to cut it short, as an eternal spirit, he received a useful and much needed lesson, which is that he can't kick his mule and treat it badly, while the mule is always offering his support in the work that he's doing. But the word in a rule is setting in chapter 42. So they talked about it already, that nature is an active working place of spirits as well. And they take advantage of Aniseto's presence to have a worship session, so to speak, or a worship.
It can be like it really looks like a God at home, right? A gospel at home.
Yeah.
We just sit down and then we talk about the gospel. It doesn't have to be in a certain place. I always remember Chico Xavier, right? The medium that wrote this book. I mean, that was the one who André Luiz wrote through him. That he had this meeting for a long time in Minas Gerais, where he lived, under this tree.
Yeah.
And then he would go there under the tree, sit down, and there would come people, and then they would have this reading of the gospel, of some passages of the gospel, and then they would just talk about it right there on nature. So it reminds me as well, and even they mention it here, that I think Minister Veneranda in No Solar, they have the green halls there that she started to create it, that to remind us of how nature is important to us. So it is really interesting that we see this here.
Yeah, and also that the workers that were there, they asked Aniceto before he started doing his comments, and so we see that the good is, well, Aniceto makes the most of his presence wherever he is. So as he was asked to give them a lecture, a gospel lecture, he happily agrees to do so and talks about the necessity of nature being treated well, I would say it like that, by us humans. So like he says in the last paragraph of Paul's letter, creation anxiously awaits the cooperation of the incarnate children of God. So let us continue to help or to treat well, to maintain the plant kingdom around us, to animal kingdom around us as well, because everything is part of creation. Everything has its worth its value in the harmonious working of the universe. And that's what we sometimes forget, because we think that we, the human race, are superior to the plants and animals, but we depend on them as much as they depend on us treating them well as well, right? But it's getting dark already, it's getting late. The day has been very fruitful and useful and learning experience as well. And in chapter 43, they are getting back to Donna Isabel's house before the meeting.
Yeah, and then what is interesting is that they show us that before these meetings, right, before they start, we have a setup of spiritual protection for that special place, for that place where that meeting will happen. We already saw it happening before. We already talked about it. But here they will show it really preparing the physical space to receive not only the sick who will come, but also to prepare the environment for those who will come physically to take the most out of the meeting that will happen there. And see, this is a house, right? So it doesn't really matter where that is. And that's why we say that there's no, let's say, complete and utter need to have a spiritist center. It is important for us to gather together. Because we are social beings. But if we are, wherever we are, if we are focused, if we are really trying to connect, if we are really trying to improve and to take that work forward, there will always be those who are together with us preparing that environment for what will happen there.
Yeah, that's true. And but because the energies and the vibrations are so important, it's quite special that Donna Isabel has this room only reserved for the gospel studies and for holding those meetings. So it is really important that the ambient is kept as clean as possible, that not only the spirits will make their part of it, but that we do it as well. So at the end, Aniceto announces, let's get to work. For us, the spirit workers, the labor has already begun. And on the material plane, it's gonna start with the opening prayer of the meeting. So chapter 44, assistance.
Andrea Luiz is almost taken by surprise here, which it's interesting. It is for us, right? Sometimes, and I'm remembering this. Sometimes we're at the Spiritist Center, and then comes, time for the meeting to start, and we come to a person and ask the person, "Can you do a prayer for us to start the meeting?" And the person looks at me or looks at us and says, "Who, me?" And I would say, why not, right? It's the same thing that happens here. Aniceto looks at Andrea and says, "Hey, let's get to work. Let's apply some passes." And Andrea looks at him, "Am I ready for this?" And Aniceto looks at him, and I'm laughing because I'm just picturing this image here, like Aniceto looking at him and said, "Why not? I mean, you've been with us for such a long time, and why are you still in doubt that you can do something?" Right? A sincere desire to cooperate and the notion of the responsibility involved are enough for us to begin any new task successfully. Man, Andrea, you are here. You've been together with me. Yeah, I can see what you can do. Why do you still doubt that you can do? You know that you want to help, and it's a calling for all of us, right? If we are there, if we are striving to make the best, we are ready to do it. And what is wrong with that? And he says, no, we have to develop this goodwill to be ready to serve at all times. And maybe that's why the title of the chapter is called Assistance. I love the beginning of this chapter. I really love it.
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? Because it makes us feel so really close to the spirits, because we could sometimes feel, oh, aren't they much superior? But we don't change just because we leave our body and go back to the spirit world. And in this part, they show us even more how much assistance work is going on the spiritual plane. So not even yet talking about the assistance that we receive incarnates when we go to a spiritual meeting. But here they start with the passes, so the energy transference. And Andre is making his first experience here and has success, because it's the case of the woman that couldn't see and wanted to see, and by applying passes, she is able to do so afterwards. And first he was shocked about his capability of helping, and because the woman immediately says to him, emissary of the good, glorifying him, which is understandable, because, who wouldn't want to be healed? But the lesson for Andre is that it's really important to sow the good all the time. The germination, growth, blossom, and fruit belong to the Lord, because with the other spirits he is not as successful. And it's one of the themes that goes through the whole book, which reminds us as well at the meeting the gospel meeting at Donna Isabel's, the mustard seed, something small will grow into something big at some point, and the sowing. This is our part. Reaping of the fruits, not our business, belongs to God.
That's true.
And in chapter 45, we come to a sickly mind.
Yeah, when I was just remembering that in the beginning of the book, and we just had that conversation a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
There is this group of people, right, where we go following them, telling their own stories, what they had to do, what they couldn't do, what they didn't do, and why they were suffering, why they were back there to learn again. And here we find a person that is like that, right? Is this Dr. Fidelis that will, just doesn't understand. And maybe he is another one of those spirits who arrived on earth to probably learn the lesson and use his knowledge to do something for good, and not just to oppose what other people are trying to do. And which reminds me of sometimes to be too stubborn in our own ideas without really listening to other people can be a sign of being or of having a sick mind, which is the title of this chapter.
Yeah, and like he says, I've been looking for something that satisfies me and the Spirit's teachings. So he wants proof, he wants materialization, he wants like a personal testimonial just for him in order for him to believe. And that's something that can mislead us quite easily, because Spiritism is for us to understand the laws of the universe, how God's laws work. And yes, we are important, like everyone else is important, but the universe and the spirits are not there to satisfy our personal whims. And this is where we really need to change the perspective, and to, in studying the teachings, the theories, find the openness in our hearts and our minds that will kickstart the inner transformation in ourselves, that will help us to develop that unshakable faith, that faith that guides us, that helps us, and not lean back and wait for someone giving us some marvelous, so to speak, experience, and then we say, okay, now I believe it. That's not how it works, because then we have a sickly mind, because we're not open to learn, we're not open to understand the greatness of life itself.
True. And Aniceto, at the end, answering Vicente's question, they said, what does this man want after all? And Aniceto says, he himself would find that very difficult to answer. He doesn't know. He is so sick that he doesn't even know what he wants. He is so attached to the physical senses that no matter what you tell them, no matter how much he sees, he will always say that there's always this, there's always that. And so he expects everything from other people, like you said, a miraculous, like a marvelous, something that comes from heavens and opens his eyes. He doesn't want to have his eye open, so he will close it again. So he is not open, he is not wanting, he does not want to really learn something.
Yeah, that leads us to chapter 46, continuing to learn. And the comparison to that there's still 1 hour left before the meeting will start on the physical plane, and the comparison that there are 35 incarnates, whereas on a spiritual plane there are more than 200, and gives us the responsibility to really be careful how we behave before and after, for that matter, a spiritist meeting in the spiritist center, because it is a sacred place of service, of assistance, of work of the good spirits, and they come way before we arrive there, and they most likely continue their work after we have finished our studies as well.
Yeah, and if we learn something, right, the question is, what am I going to do with that knowledge, with what I just learned? So Aniceto says at one point, so if every edifying work condition expresses the individual's commitment, then all knowledge of Christ implies responsibility. So all knowledge that I have from the teachings of the good philosophers or of Jesus, of any religion, it implies responsibility. I have the knowledge. What am I doing with the knowledge that I have? Am I using it? Why am I using it? What am I using that knowledge for? Am I using to take advantage of other people, or am I using it to help other people, to improve my life, other people's lives, without thinking of being selfish, being too vain, being too proud of myself? So it's a good chapter to reflect upon what I learned, what I have as a mean of knowledge, and what I am doing with what I already have.
Yeah, that brings us to chapter 47, Hard at Work Again, where Mr. Benton, who is responsible for the meeting, gives the gospel explanations inspired as well by the good spirits, and they tell us how the audience receives it, and says that it's much more difficult for them to assimilate, to concentrate on what they're listening to, and that they lack the harmony needed in the group in order to make the most of the lesson. We only talked about it a few weeks ago, so we don't go into too much detail right now. But the lessons actually are repeated as well, because then again we have on the spiritual side the case of the woman who concludes saying, oh, that's true, I must come to grips with my new situation here. And this counts for both planes of life. We who are incarnate, we need to come to grips with our situation here, why we are here, why the situations are like that. We get so many answers if we're honest to ourselves. And on the spiritual plane as well, the ones who left Earth, they need to accept that this part of the journey has finished for now temporarily, and that later on they will be able to get in contact with their loved ones again and help them conforming their level of evolution.
Yeah, and then there's the other case, which I just want to mention, that the other one will not be helped in this meeting because he doesn't want to be helped. Yeah. And Aniceto shows it to, not Aniceto this time is Isidoro. He tells us, if a person doesn't want to receive help, it's not charitable to impose help on that person. So we cannot waste time with this person that you want us to help. And it says it will not be charitable to give to somebody who doesn't want to receive. So we already tried. He doesn't want it. So let's move on. Let's help who really wants to be helped.
Yeah, and like I said before, the work continues after the meeting as well. So Aniceto already has been asked to help in 2 cases. One is chapter 48, the dread of death, where we have this young woman who discarnated and doesn't want to accept that she died, and her fiancé, who had discarnated way before her, was trying to help her and bring her to a place in the spiritual world, and she just was so shocked with his presence that she didn't want to open her eyes and was really paralyzed after that. And Aniceto again comes in, helps her, saying, presents himself as a new doctor, which was something she could accept, and delivers the truth, which is very interesting, in a very gentle way. He's not lying to her, but he says, you need rest, and, I'm a new doctor, and I give you some magnetic-based treatments, so it's important you sleep and rest, and everything else you will understand later. And
yeah, it is interesting, like you just said, right? He doesn't lie, he tells the truth, but the way he says it, she just doesn't understand it, but she feels comforted by it. Oh, I felt as if I was dead. He says there is no death.
Yeah.
Believe in life eternal, profound, victorious life. This is very beautiful as well. I love this part.
Yeah, sure. And chapter 49 and 50 treat of the second case. So 49, the divine machine, talking about the importance of the physical body, which especially nowadays is really, really important for us to, again, manage a balance between the physical and the spiritual. So the physical nourishment and the spiritual nourishment, taking care of the body and taking care of the mind. And in that case, Fernando had been treating his body in a way that he was literally spelled, that he was not leaving his body because his time was coming up, but that the destruction on the cellular level was at a point that there was no return, and it was time for him to leave his divine machine. And one sentence that struck me is, each organ is an autonomous department in the cellular realm, but subordinate to the individual's thoughts. So the power of the thoughts, once again, they influence our well-being, our physical well-being as well.
Yeah, that's true. And he says right after that, the mind governs this wonderful factory. And at the end of that specific talk, he says, each cell is a tiny engine running on mental impulse. So it's just a reminder that, look, you have a body, but you have a mind. Your body depends on your mind. So have a healthy mind, and it will be much easier to have a healthy body.
Yeah, and chapter 50 leads then with the process of Fernando's discarnation, and it's the quite common case that the incarnates try to keep the spirit in the flesh and not allowing him to let go. Like Aniceto explains, notice how all of them are emitting magnetic aid in an effort to help the dying man. So it's us not accepting God's timing, and it's the case where sometimes from the spiritual side they will make the physical body improve so that everybody relaxes, has their minds on other matters, and then Fernando discarnates soon after that.
once again, just to show how important our mind is, which also reminds me on this chapter that he had some bad companies, but those spirits would not be able to enter the room where he had to wait outside because he was protected due to the love of one spirit, which is really, really impressive. So how much our minds and what the friendships that we find and the companies that we choose to ourselves, how important they are for our lives, material lives and spiritual lives. And then, Francisca, it's sad, but we have to say goodbye.
Yeah, that's true. Chapter 51, last chapter of the book, The Messengers, where the week of service, during which Aniceto had allowed Vicente and Andre to accompany him, came to an end. They had learned many valuable lessons during their stay, observed, they worked, and lots of food for thought, not only for them, but for us as well. And I would like to finish repeating the prayer that Aniceto says right at the end. Mackenzie, would you like to read it for us?
Yes, I will, Francisca. I will read it again because I really love this. But before doing that, I just wanted to say something that I didn't say when we had that chapter on our regular days of studying, is that when Andre talks about renewal in the beginning of the book, and here he shows in this week how much he was able to renew himself. And one thing that I forgot to mention is that he was probably able to receive even more because he was here on earth. Although he was discarnated, he was together with us, with people that have magnetism, that we still have our bodies. And this exchange between the spiritual realm and the physical realm is the most powerful one for us to really, really improve ourselves. So let's remember that as well, that in our renewal it's very important for us to keep in touch, not only with us physically, but with us and our friends who are discarnated. So Aniceto finalizes with this beautiful prayer by saying, Lord, teach us to receive the blessings of service. We still do not know, beloved Jesus, how to understand the extent of the work you have entrusted to us. Enable us, O Lord, to form the conviction in our soul that the work of the world belongs to you, so that vanity will not insinuate itself into our hearts through the appearance of good. Give us, O Master, the spirit of consecration to our duties and unconcern for the results which belong to your love. Teach us to act without the fetters of the passions, so that we may recognize your holy purposes. Beloved Lord, help us to be your loyal servants. Beloved Master, grant us your instruction. Righteous Judge, lead us on straight pathways. Sublime Physician, restore our health. Compassionate Shepherd, lead us to the spring of living water. Wise Engineer, give us your blueprint. Magnanimous Administrator, inspire us in our tasks. Sower of good, teach us to cultivate the field of our soul. Divine Carpenter, help us to build our eternal home. Caring Potter, patch the vessel of our heart. Watchful Friend, be tolerant of our weaknesses. Prince of Peace, have compassion on our fragile spirits. Open our eyes and show us the highway to your kingdom.
So thank you, Mackenzie, for all your hard work, all your comments on helping us to understand the teachings of the messengers. And next week, we're going to have a discussion or an interview between you and Chuzara Kongo from New York. taking or looking at a different angle of the messengers as well, right?
Yeah, that's right. And it was a very good conversation. I mean, sometimes a conversation, sometimes an interview. It was a very, very, very good conversation. You will not, you'll find it very, very inspiring.
Great. So thank you very much. Have a great week, everyone. Lots of love to all of you, and thank you so much for your time, for sharing this learning with us.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.